Hello there, darlings. My name is Samuel, aka the SP Chef. I am a former Scientologist, and on my channel, I talk about my own story in Scientology as well as try to explain exactly what Scientology is. And today, I like to pose the question upon myself. Well, I was a Scientologist for 25 years, but why was I a Scientologist for such a long time? Now, anyone seeing me right now would say, darling, you don't look a day over 25. To which, of course, I would blush and say, oh, you old flirt, stop it. But yes, I did grow up in Scientology, and then when I was 25 years old, that is when I quietly left Scientology. So I think it is fair to say one can excuse the first 16 years, maybe even the first 18 years of my life where I grew up in Scientology. And the reason why I didn't leave Scientology then, simply because I was too young. Now, until the age of 18, I would be under the care of my parents, legally speaking. Although I think one could argue as well from the age of 16, I'm pretty much free to do as I wish, at least in my country of origin, which is Switzerland. And so, why after 16, or let's take the number 18, why after 18 did I still remain in Scientology? Well, we need to go back first and realize that when you grow up in Scientology, as I have, you grew up a little bit in a bubble. Now, it isn't that I was living in a separate community, that I was living somewhere in the country in its own little village with no contact of the outside world. Quite the opposite. I lived in the city. As a matter of fact, the apartment where my parents, siblings, and we lived just above the Scientology organization in Basel, which is a city in the north of Switzerland. And we just lived above it. So I really grew up in Scientology. As soon as I was able to read and write, I did Scientology courses, I did different kinds of auditing, I did the various forms of drills that they have, as well as go out when I was a child with my other siblings or with other Scientology children to give out leaflets and booklets and try to recruit people in that sort of way for Scientology. And I grew up very much in a sort of elite way of thinking of us as a Scientologist, that we Scientologists are more elite than everybody else, that we know the truth and everybody else is just ignorant, is just stupid really, is working for absolutely no reason, for no purpose in life really. But we are here to save the planet, right? So we are the only people who know the truth. And so I did look down a little bit upon other people. And just generally speaking, I just didn't think very much of the normal world or normal society in general. And so I grew up very much in a bubble. Now, I did go and attend regular school until I was 10 years old. And then after that, from the age of 10 to 13, I went to two separate Scientology schools in Switzerland. So again, it was a bit more isolating. But until I was 10 years old, I went to regular school. And yes, I would say I had a couple of childhood friends. But friends is maybe a little bit too much, because again, I didn't see them as equal, So I was very arrogant, by the way, if you haven't quite noticed that as a child, very much. And then later on, when I was 9 years old, I signed a contract to work for the rest of my life in Scientology. Both of my siblings signed that as well. They are older than me. And they were both then shipped off to Denmark, in Copenhagen, which is the main seat of Scientology for Europe, and they work there in the so-called C organization, which is an elite group within Scientology, almost like the clergy you could sort of compare it with. And then my parents and we joined the C organization in St. Hill in East Grinstead, which is in England. I was 13 years old then. So then I kept on going. So when I was 13 years old, I was completely then cut off from the outside world, because this is really a community of its own. So when you work for the C organization, the place where you live is provided by Scientology. The place that you work, obviously, is Scientology, and you're not allowed to just wander off or just take a day off, take a stroll or something. If you want to take a day off, you need to go through a very intense procedure to be able to have a day off, and it might not even be approved. You need to get somebody to replace you and so on and so forth. And people tend to just work there for years and years and years. And you work there between 100 hours, 120 hours a week. I mean, that is quite normal for a pitiful amount of pay. So the pay when I was there, so I was there between the years of 2005 until 2012. And so I got 10, 15, 20 pounds a week. In theory, I was supposed to get 50 pounds, and I saw these 50 pounds a week, maybe speaking very generously, maybe 10 times. Maybe 10 weeks in these 7 years that I was there did I see this £50 a week. Usually it was £10, £5, sometimes even no money at all. During Christmas time, we had Christmas bonuses where we had a bit more money to be able to buy presents and so on and so forth. But other than that, you had no money. So there was no way to be able to save up money. Okay. And then in this sea organization base in St. Hill, many of us that were there were foreigners, as well as that is the same in Denmark. And I believe also in America, where there are also sea organizations there, where they recruit foreigners. So you are in a foreign country. So even if you were to say, okay, I want to leave now, I've realized this is not what it is supposed to be, and I'm not happy here, I want to leave. Well, you don't really have any money to buy yourself a flight to go back to the country where you're originally from, right? And because you're in a foreign country, you don't even know where to go. Oftentimes, you don't necessarily even know the language, and you've never been anywhere in that country apart from where you live and where you work for Scientology. So you have no idea, really, where to go, what to do. So this is, for example, one of the reasons why I was in Scientology for so long. So I was then in the Sea Org until I was 20 years old, and then with 20 I left, and I came back to Switzerland. At that point, my father had already left, so I was able to stay with him for a while. And I still consider, however, myself a Scientologist. So, okay, now I'm 20. I left the place where I worked for the Sea Org in St. Hill, and I came back to Switzerland. So why did I not say, all right, that's it? Obviously, I had a bad experience in working for Scientology. So why didn't I just say, that's it? I'm not a Scientologist anymore. Well, again, I grew up in that. I only knew that. And that was my comfort zone, so to speak, being a Scientologist. It's a weird way of saying it, a comfort zone, because really I was suffering. But I knew this suffering. I was able to manage that amount of suffering, and I was more afraid of, well, what is if I step away from that? What other kinds of suffering do I have to deal with that I have never have to deal with before, So I was afraid of change. I was comfortable, in a manner of speaking, with the suffering that I already knew. So I'd much rather wanted to stay in that rather than step out of that. So that is one aspect. Another aspect is that I was afraid of the world outside, because all my life I've been told that the world outside of Scientology is just corruption, it is death, it is war, every second person is a drug addict, all politicians are corrupt, there's no way you can live happily in a fulfilled life without Scientology. So I was afraid that is actually true, because I already knew Scientology. I never had a life before. So I couldn't compare it and be able to say, well, actually, that's not quite true. I mean, there was no reason for me not to really believe that. Now, during my whole time in Scientology up to this point, so I'm 20, again, to recap, I'm 20 years old at this point, did I never ever see anything that I thought it was wrong, it was evil, it was not right? In retrospect, I would say, yes, I did. However, at that time, I didn't see it that way. I would say to myself, oh, maybe I just don't understand that. Or maybe I just haven't done enough Scientology to really get why that is happening. Or maybe at the most, I will think to myself, that was a bit unfair, But apart from that, I would never had any more negative thoughts, because the only way you can really have a negative thought on that really is if you have something to compare it to. Or if you can rely on your gut feeling, on your emotions. But in Scientology, you learned to dull your emotions, not to have emotions, to be like a robot. And so I grew up with that attitude. So I didn't really have my instinct or my the emotions in me telling me, okay, this is an evil thing, you need to step away from that. I learned to just ignore that. And so that was part of that. So I'm 20 years old at this point. And I kept on doing Scientology. I kept on going then. So I came back to Switzerland, to Basel, this northern city in Switzerland, where I grew up, as a child. And I came back there. I lived here. I started to work. And I still went to the Scientology organization there, where I did several different courses and so on and so forth. And then what happened was I then got a letter saying I have to do military service, because in Switzerland all males have to do military service. That is not something you can avoid. You have to do that. Of course, there are certain circumstances where you don't have to do it, but it's rather complicated. Anyway, so I had to go and do military service, and then after that I actually went to a trade school to learn to become a professional chef. And because of this time that I was then away from Scientology, almost forced, because I had to do the military service, and then pretty much straight after that, there was only a few months of time between having finished the military service and doing my trade school with the apprenticeship to become a chef. There was only a few months, and then after that I started that, and that schooling, that was 3 years. So because of this time, I was not able to do Scientology anymore. So slowly and slowly, the brainwashing that I had all my life going on was slowly going away. I was starting to work with people that never had anything to do with Scientology, and I came to realize that these people are absolutely wonderful people just for who they are without Scientology. And I'm sure most of them had never even heard of Scientology before. And so slowly and slowly I was able to see, okay, at first I would say to myself, all right, maybe Scientology isn't the only good thing. It certainly is good, but there are clearly other things that work. But the more time I was away from Scientology, and I was able to now start to be able to compare things. You see, before I didn't have anything to compare it with. Now I was able to compare it. I was able to compare my life now, not really being involved in Scientology and working with people that never had anything to do with Scientology, and be able to compare it to how it was before. And I could see how bad Scientology was and how wrong. I then started to open up myself and talk to other people about my own experience in Scientology, and their reactions made me realize, okay, what I went through wasn't only weird, but was actually very damaging to me. And so slowly but surely, with 23, with 23, that is when I finished my military service, and then that's when I started the trade school, going to culinary school, having done the apprenticeship, which then went on for 3 years. And then with 23, I started to go on the internet and seek out interviews from ex-Scientologists or just informational YouTube videos like this one here to try to figure out, what happened to other people who left Scientology. Did they have a similar experience? Am I the only one? Because I didn't know anybody else. As far as I was concerned, Scientology isn't... At this point, I would think to myself, okay, Scientology isn't maybe quite so good, or maybe it doesn't work quite as well as they say it does, but I didn't really think Scientology was evil. I didn't see it as being something bad. But then starting to go on the internet and seeing all these interviews of all these people, I saw hundreds of interviews and videos explaining what Scientology is and really breaking it down, I came to realize how evil it really is, Scientology, fundamentally evil, and how it is only about money and trying to control people. And that is then with 25, so after a couple of years of going into the internet, working with non-Scientologists, not really having to do with anything with Scientology anymore, I came to realize, wow, how evil it is. And then with 25, I said to myself, okay, I'm not a Scientologist anymore. So that is why it took me such a long time really to get away from Scientology, to say, no, I'm not a Scientologist anymore, because there was a lot of resistance also from my part. I didn't want to know the truth, because you see, you also have to understand that I had to say to myself, okay, my life has been a lie up to this point. All of these courses that I did, all of the money that my parents wasted for me doing these courses, rather than sending me off to a better school or whatever, was completely wasted. It was for nothing. And that... it does, mess with you quite a bit to realize that your whole life has been, a lie, and hasn't been really how life actually is. And so that is the reason why I was a Scientologist for 25 years. Why for a quarter of a century I was a Scientologist. So, my darlings, I do hope you found this video interesting, perhaps even entertaining, and dare say educational. Do let me know what you think of that. If you have your own experience or your own reasoning why you were in Scientology for such a long time, please put it down in the comment section so that we can all read about that. Or you can shoot me an email at thespchef@gmail.com if you would like to tell me about your story a bit more privately. In any case, I wish you a most excellent day and marvelous week. Goodbye.